Denise's daughter
Mm-hmm.
had a little baby.
I heard.
What happened? I haven't heard anything.
Oh, the baby has been born. I know that the middle name is Denise. I can't remember the first name. I don't know if Denise is back in
It's
town.
a girl?
Yes. I don't know if she's back in town. If she is, there's handbell practice tonight, so that's...
Well, she went back Sunday, so.
Well, yes, I do know that she wasn't here on Sunday, so... yeah, I don't know if... like I said, I don't know when she's planning on getting back, but we can be excited with her for that. I think Bill might be in Texas now, visiting with Annabeth. I know he was planning a trip out there, so... and Tom is somewhere doing.
If it's a day that ends in Y,
Yeah.
Tom is out of town.
So basically, he is a well-traveled man.
I was kind of surprised to see him Sunday.
Yeah. So, and Mark will probably be here right as we get started and really into it. Then even though I don't know which way he comes from, he might get
Well,
nailed
it's
by
coming
traffic.
north on Robert Road.
So Bill's not in Texas. He's right there.
Okay. Yeah, I guess he's not in Texas.
When are you heading down to Texas, Bill?
So did you hear us talking about you?
But anyway, so we will dive into today. We're moving into John chapter 9. And unlike last week where we had 6 verses, John chapter 9, see, told you, as soon as I get started, Mark will show up. Welcome, sir. How are you doing today?
Good. Well, the traffic is just brutal, but I made it.
Glad that you're here.
Well, that wreck at the river didn't help.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just a...
It's back from the river all the way to Northridge.
Yeah, well, I
Oh,
came
no.
out Willio, and as soon as you turn left out Willio to come up like the hill, Roswell, it started right there. The 2 left lanes, luckily the right lane I went, but...
Yeah.
Whew, anywho.
So today we're going to be hitting John chapter 9. Unlike last week where we only had like 6 verses to cover, today we have like the whole chapter. So in many ways we're not going to cover it nearly as well, right? And where to cut this miracle off is kind of a difficult question. Because so much of this miracle is the aftermath of the miracle and what comes after. So we're going to basically use the chapter as our guide, although we're not going to get into huge amounts of details in the discourse that follows after. And again, this is one of those sections where it starts, as far as a unit within John. I mean, the miracle itself begins in 9. But I mean, look just to the first phrase there. As he passed by. This seems to be a connecting phrase, right? This isn't sometime later or when he was at this place. This seems to be connected to the previous unit, although not quite sure. Maybe John is using this as a break. However, what is definitely worth noting for us, and this has been something we've been talking about a lot, is the section right before that, right? If you look up the heading, this is one of those center points of the purpose of John. It's that time that Jesus confesses, right? Before Abraham was, ego eimi, I am, right? So we have that divine name. This is one of the times they try and stone him here. And so the one verse up, so they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. As he passed by, so it seems like this might be immediately following that text. Although there is, I will say, just like with most things, there's some disagreement on that. But before we dive into the text itself and really get into the reading today, are there any questions or anything from previous sessions that we can touch on? Wonderful. Well, tell you what, let's see. I'm a volunteer to read. We'll just do a paragraph at a time, verses 1 through 7. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Let's see verse 7. So, okay. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing.
All right, so here we have, really by all accounts, this is the miracle account. Although, like I said, we're going to have an aftermath to this particular miracle, an impact. So we're going to be dealing with it a little bit there. But let's spend some time here and really kind of dig into the details in this opening section, because I think it'll help us not only see some of these bigger things that we've been dealing with, but it'll really help us understand where the backlash is coming and help us see those connections. So, well, first of all, maybe we'll do it this way. Any questions on this miracle?
I have one, but I hope it's quick. Culturally speaking, it says at night no one can work. Were there any trades? Did anybody work at night or no, because it was
Yes.
hot? Or
Yes. So, I mean, guards worked at night, obviously.
Yeah.
Farmers would work at night. I mean, that's kind of the move
Just
there.
curious.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because I don't plan on spending a huge amount of time on
I
this.
don't understand when it says you can't work at night. I'm like, why not?
I think Jesus is speaking here metaphorically, and I read this as him speaking eschatologically. He's looking to the end of the world.
Like light and darkness type of stuff?
Yeah, so like the sunset of Earth kind of thing.
Okay.
That's my rendering, or that's how I take it. Kind of with that view of, now is the time to work. Soon, I'm coming back a second time, almost sort of thing. And Joe, is that that's kind of how you would run with this? Though we will spend some time on the first half of that verse as we get to it. So first of all, right, we see Jesus passing by, and who is it that kind of initiates this interaction for the healing of the man born blind?
His disciples.
So his disciples do. His disciples speak first, although most of the commenters that I read say something along the lines of, well, when it says he saw a man blind from birth, Jesus is staring at this guy so obviously that the disciples say something, is kind of the idea that they have. But who is not initiating this miracle is the man. The man is just there. Jesus, his disciples, whoever it may be, they begin the interaction, right? And the disciples have an interesting question. What is their question for Jesus?
Who sinned, the man or his parents?
Who sinned, the man or his parents? There's one extra little bit in there that I had never really considered, the strangeness of it.
The study Bible says, did he sin in the womb?
Okay, so it's
What?
from birth, right? We're going to deal with that in just a second here. Something I hadn't noticed, but a number of commenters kind of pick up on, is that they seem to just know that this man has been blind his entire life. No one ever says it. The best option that I have seen is that they know this person. They have recognized him in their passing. He is not a person that they have never met before. That somehow they have knowledge this man has been blind from birth. It's just assumed, right? And so then there's the question. Who sinned? This man or his parents? Why are the disciples asking this question about sin?
Didn't people back then thought if you had any kind of physical infirmity, somebody must have sinned?
So often that's the case, yeah. Any other reasons why they might be associating this man's blindness with his sin? Or with sin, rather? Well, probably, oh, you got something, Joe? Okay, probably the best way to take this is that the disciples have been paying attention and they're starting to learn things, but they haven't quite gotten the applications right. When Jesus healed the man with the lame man, the man was paralyzed, dropsy, all that kind of stuff, what was Jesus' instructions to that man after the healing? Go and sin no more. So you can almost see the logic, code running through the disciples' mind. Jesus told the man who is paralyzed to sin no more. Therefore, he was paralyzed because he had sinned. That's, analysis 1. This man is blind and has been from birth. Therefore, sin is the cause. Right? What does Jesus say about this? He says, your logic problem has an error in it, right? There's a bug in the code. That is not what this is about. So, before we kind of deal with that then, we got to deal with their question because it brings up weird implications. So, well, let's just start with the easy one, right? What would be the implications if the answer was that his parents had sinned? What would be the implications of this? And where might the disciples be getting this idea from? Because they think it's a reasonable question.
Parents would have to do something bad to have God punish them.
Well, maybe, right? Yeah, and so what are they recognizing the, at least, potential reality of?
Well, they're really faced with two dilemmas. Either this man's being punished for his parents' sin, or he's being punished for a sin that he did before he was born.
Right.
In lieu of future sin, or, it's...
Yeah, we'll unravel the second half because that gets messy and tangled. But with this first half, the disciples are at least implying the expectation of generational guilt, if you will. The parent sinned, the child is punished. Where might they be getting this from? Or is this just a completely off the wall idea?
The third and fourth generation of them that...
This is kind of in the Mosaic covenant, this idea that, right, I will punish the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. Of course, followed up by I will give blessing to the 1000th generation or whatever it is. I dare say that we have some of this even in our Christian theology that could lead you down this path that the disciples take. And that is the sense of, right, original sin inherited from Adam sort of thing. And there's a way that this is true, right? You have your original corruption, right, formula of concord stuff that we talk about. You have that as an inheritance from Adam, right? You have that because of the sin of your first father, right? Now, you're also involved in all of that and, that sort of thing. We dealt with that in the formula of concord. So in that sense, right, those who are descended from Adam inherit this kind of guilt and sin, right? Of course, does Jesus acknowledge and kind of say, yeah, that's what's going on here? Well, no. The blindness in this man is not a result of something his parents did. So while, yes, we in some sense can talk about inherited guilt through generations, that's very generalized. And it doesn't help in this situation no matter what, even if Jesus was silent on this, because everyone has that inheritance equally. And so why would this man be blind and someone else isn't, right? So see how it doesn't fit the narrative here. All right. Then we have the more problematic half of the question. Was it this man who sinned, right? So what do we know about this question, right? It is that in his birth he had blindness, and they are wondering if it was because of his sins that God has afflicted him with this blindness, right? Joe, you offered one option, which was this is preemptive punishment for future sins. Steve, you got another one, which is slightly less strange, but maybe more. Is, oh, well, he was sinning in the womb. There is a third option that we're very confident the disciples didn't have in mind, but it's worth dealing with. Does anyone know what a potential third option here is?
Yeah, that the prophecy in the scriptures be fulfilled. With the Messiah coming, the blind you see.
Well, okay, so yes, Jesus is going to use, that's where it eventually goes. But I mean specifically, how could you have a situation, right or wrong, where this man has sinned before his birth? We talked about this very
Could he
briefly.
have sinned in the spirit? Because God says, "I knew you before you were born."
You're very close. When you're close enough, I'm going to give you at least partial credit on the test for that. Yeah. There's this idea that's floating around in the early church, in the era of the early church, I should say. It is picked up by the church father Origen. So we did talk about this for like 2 minutes in that hour and a half long class on Origen. It's known as the transmigration of souls, which sounds like a really cool sci-fi movie or something.
Yeah.
But what the transmigration of souls basically teaches, and there's all sorts of different versions of this, but the general idea is that within the 6 days of creation, God created all human souls. All of them were created and put in some state of storage, almost, if you will. They existed somewhere in a spiritual realm. And then those souls, when you're born, get taken out of the spiritual realm, put in your body, and now that's you, right? By the way, I should preface, this is not a Christian idea. Origen talks about it, but we mentioned it because he gets called out for heresy for saying stuff like this later. Now, while you have no memory of your soul during this time, you were doing things. Not in the sense of like we are doing things in a way that we can't quite understand. And so, if you did good things, you were born in a good situation, if you will. If you did bad things in this pre-existing soul state, you might be born blind, right? This idea exists within the general culture, although we don't think that the disciples were interacting with this. Like I said, I bring it up because it is something that does exist. Can anyone think of the place that we see this most nowadays? Because this idea is still very prevalent in the world. It did pop up in the Gnostic, this isn't what I was looking for, but it does pop up in the Gnostic circles. And in the Gnostic thought, the fact that you were in a human body meant that you screwed up, and now you need to fix the problem of you being incarnate, right? But that's not where the most common connection nowadays is to this idea.
Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay, they get it a little bit. That's not who I was thinking of. This group is way bigger than them. But yeah, they do have some of this sort of
Which is a rationale for polygamy, to get all of these souls
right out so that you can save them. Yeah. But there's an even bigger group of people who have this thought, and you all know what it is. You just don't know that it's a connection here.
Who is it? The ones that believe in the reincarnation? The Hindus?
Mark, you are on fire tonight. This is a major staple in both Hindu and Buddhist philosophy, theology, right? Because they kind of go together. Absolutely. You are existing in this state because of what you did in a previous life. Now, often that is an embodied life, right? But not always. In fact, you spend time in between your embodied lives in this spiritualized state. It's very general, but I mean, this idea does exist, right? Why might humans cook this thing up, right? What's the motivation behind a system of karma, which is the Hindu Buddhist sort of a deal, or this idea of transmigration of souls. Why is this appealing to people? What are they trying to deal with?
Don't blame me.
In what sense?
Well, but in my soul way back, I was sinful,
Yeah.
and so now, you know, I'm something different, and whatever affliction I have is connected to
Oh, yeah.
something I had nothing to do with.
You're close. I think the idea though is that the affliction you have is connected with that previous state, and that is who you are. But you're really close, I think, to where this thought comes from. What is the question that humans are trying to grapple with where they land on this? By the way, I think this is also where the disciples are coming from in this question. So the other way to ask this is, why are the disciples asking this question? What are they trying to figure out?
Why bad things happen to people?
3 for 3.
I'm going to swap with you, Mark. Yeah, the official term for this is it's a theodicy. We look at the world and we see that some people get a raw deal and some people have phenomenal luck, right? They're born at the right place at the right time, silver spoon in their mouth. Whereas other people are born in the gutter and they never get out, never have a chance to get out. This man, born blind, never had a chance, right? And so the question is, well, why did this happen to this man? And they're trying to rationalize that. And what makes a lot of human sense is he screwed up, or maybe his parents screwed up. Right? So maybe it's not him, maybe it was his parents that did something wrong. And so this suffering, this bad thing that has happened to a potentially good person, right, or just a person, is not a problem. In fact, it's divine justice being meted out in our lives, right? This is why the whole karmic system exists, right? And by the way, karma is more complicated than just do good things and get a better next life. It's far more complicated than that. It's really fascinating, but that's not what we're doing here today. But what that question does, or what karmic systems do, what the disciples are attempting to do here, is what we often say in theological circles, is they're trying to get God off the hook, right? Because one option to answering this question, why do bad things happen to good people, is, well, there aren't good people. They were sinful. Something happened in the past, them, their parents. This is their fault, right? What's another option?
There's a bad God who punishes good people.
Yeah, that God is just capricious and just punishes people randomly at happenstance, right?
Greco-Roman.
Yeah, you get a real Greco-Roman sort of idea of the gods don't care. They mete out punishment and reward wherever they see fit, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. How does Jesus deal with this?
He's saying it so that the works of God can be displayed in the man.
So that's his answer. How does that deal with what is likely behind the disciples' question?
Nobody sinned.
Well, God's going to use it for good.
Okay, well, so this is the third solution to the theodicy, which is also problematic, which is it's not really bad. You just think it's bad, right? By the way, these are these are the three classic ways to solve this problem, but none of them work well, or all of them are deeply problematic. And one of them is, one is the people aren't really good, they are evil. The second is God isn't really good, he is evil, capricious, something along those lines. The last one is, well, it's not really bad. You think it's bad, but it's not. You hear this a lot at funerals. right? People go around and say, "Oh, well, this is really bad right now. This person's with Jesus now, or God needed an angel or something like that." Which some of those things, the God needed an angel thing, that's just way off base. The fact that there is good that comes out of death, i.e., that the person isn't suffering anymore, potentially depending on the situation, or that they're with God, like that's true, but that doesn't make it better for those who are mourning and grieving, right? We can still recognize, no, this is really awful. This should not have happened, right? There's something wrong here, right? So that is a potential way to go about this. It's not what Jesus is actually doing here, because that kind of runs into other problems. But he does say this was so that God's glory might be revealed, right? So I guess what he doesn't say is, oh, this isn't a bad thing, this is a good thing, right? That's not. It's if you're not careful, you can get there, but that's not what's happening.
So it gives him an opportunity to show he's God.
Yeah, Jesus ignores that question. Or he ignores the theodicy. He just is like, I'm not dealing with that. I'm not. And this, by the way, is the faithful way to deal. Oh, I just used the word theodicy. Did I use that earlier in this class and tell you what? Okay, good. Theodicy is this question, right? The faithful way to deal with theodicy is to say, God is good, bad things are bad, and people are sinful, but they don't earn the bad things that happen, right? I mean, there are times when they do, but in a large part, right? And just say we don't really understand how that all fits together. You can't answer the theodicy in a faithful way. So Jesus doesn't. He says, this isn't about human suffering. This man was born blind so that the works of God might be displayed. That really, I mean, if you really think about it, that doesn't solve their problem of, well, hold on, he was still born blind. No idea how old this guy is, right? We know he's an adult because of what's commented on later in the text. But, he's been blind that whole time. So it doesn't actually solve this problem. But Jesus, right, he says, it's not this man's sin or his parents, but the works of God might be displayed in him, right? Let's see. I'm just making sure I'm hitting all of the things I wanted to deal with. I am good. All right. And then verse 4, we got another kind of interesting little quote from Jesus. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. And we've already touched on that second part as much as I planned on. But parsing out this first half of the verse is a little strange. So a lot of pronouns in here, right? So let's deal with this. Who is the him? Well, okay, we'll go easiest to hardest. Who's me in this sentence? Jesus, right? Who sent me? Jesus. Easy. Cool. Who's the him?
The Father.
The Father. Okay. We got that. The works of him, the Father, who sent me, Jesus. Who is the we?
I guess him and his disciples.
So that's one option. So we know part of the we is Jesus, right? Because it's first person. So Jesus is included in this, but is Jesus in who?
Everybody.
Everybody.
Let us make man.
Okay, that's another potential way to take it, is that this is still Father and Son. When I had gone through this, I would have gone with Jesus and the disciples. He's talking to them, he's instructing them. And there's truth to that. Basically, every commentary I read takes that we differently, identifying the we as Jesus and the man born blind, that they are the ones who will do the works of the Father who sent Jesus, right? And I think that these people who are way smarter than me are right. One of those great little lines. I think they're right here. Now, there's implications for the disciples, for the whole world, right? But we'll just assume for a second, if the we does refer to Jesus and the man born blind, what is the work that is being done while it is still day?
Oh, he's got to find his way to the pool.
Okay, he does need to find his way to
He
the
has to
pool,
walk, right?
but that's not. Yes, he needs to do that, but that's not. I don't think that's the work that Jesus is referring to here. Well, so far in the gospel, what has the purpose of Jesus' ministry been? And I say so far because we're not at the cross yet, right? The salvation aspect will happen and is a part of all of this, but so far in the drive of the gospel, what is the work that Jesus has been doing?
Healing.
Well, okay, so I'm looking for the main category, the big picture, and kind of the way he accomplishes that is partly healing, right?
Okay.
We've obviously seen a lot of the miracles are under this main heading of work here.
Oh, his work is to do the Father's will. Yeah.
Yeah, he is revealing himself, and by revealing himself, he is revealing the Father, right? And so, how then, if the work is the work of revelation, let's just say, how does this man become involved in this work of revealing Jesus?
So that we could be Jesus and the Father too, right? I mean,
Well, it could. That's Joe kind of touched on that. But if the we is Jesus and the man born blind, how does the man born blind become involved in this act of witness? Or this testimony, this revelation of the light of the world who came into the darkness? Which we'll touch on in just a second here too. Well, I know we haven't read it, but what does the man do next after he's healed?
There's some health people.
He talks about it, right? And he identifies Jesus even though he's not quite sure who Jesus is yet. We get that later where he kind of figures it out. And when I say figures it out, I mean, he was blind. He did not see who Jesus was. He literally does not know when he begins his witness. But he does talk about the man who healed him, right? And we'll get to that later here. And so we see that what Jesus is doing here, along with many of the other miracles, is he is revealing himself. And he is, once again, this is not the first time that the subject of a miracle, the object of a miracle, I was really bad at those. Indirect object, anyway. That the one who had the miracle performed to them or in their presence then becomes witness, right? Just about every time, that's the order of operations, right? Jesus turns water into wine, disciples begin to bear witness about him, right? Because they recognize who he is, right? The man at the pool, not the pool, Siloam, Bethesda, right now I'm getting all mixed up here, is healed, begins to tell about Jesus, right? The feeding of the 5,000, same thing. Oh, the man with the sick son too, right? He begins to witness. As soon as this miracle happens, witness follows. And so this man born blind is a major part of that. And I think that is what the we and the work is. Now, of course, we who are reading this today look at this and say, well, what is the work of him who sent Jesus, right? That I am now included in through the miracles that happened to me, right? Most specifically, new life in the waters of baptism, right? Well, it's the same work. It's revealing Jesus to the world, right? It's, I know it's out of John, but it's Great Commission stuff. And again, with that thesis of the book of John, these things are written so that you may believe, right? This is the witness of the work. You guys tracking with me on that? Okay. All right, Jesus then, and I'll use this as my springboard, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world, right? So we have some fun little poetic plays here, right? Jesus sees the man born blind. Jesus, who is the light of the world, sees a man who is in darkness. There is now that I'm reading my note on this, the connection is a little bit more tenuous than I was initially excited about. But if we're going to look back again to another portion of John with Nicodemus, see, we didn't even cover this in this class, right? What is Jesus' instruction to Nicodemus? Do you guys remember?
You must be born again.
Like I said, Mark, just pull up a chair over here. You're nailing it, dude.
I read my Bible.
It's coming out. Absolutely. It says you have to be born again, right? This man was born blind. He needs to be born again, right? I mean, like I said, now that I don't have the giant book in front of me, that's more of a tenuous connection than I thought when I wrote the note down. But I still think it's there, right? And so, how then does Jesus go about the miracle, right? Because we've seen Jesus performing miracles in all sorts of different ways, right? So how does he go about this miracle? He spits in the dirt, and he takes the dirt, the mud, which I'm going to change that word for us in a little bit, and I'll let Joe deal with vocabulary. And then he puts it on his eyes, and then what happens?
So we're gonna wash it out.
He just has to go wash it off. You gotta love the church fathers, right? Because we've seen this, right? The church fathers look to all these various miracles where they happen at long distance, and they make the point there that it's not the things that are being manipulated, but it's Jesus himself performing these miracles. And so here they say, well, he spit in the mud to make sure that everyone knew that it wasn't the pool of Siloam that healed this man. And he made him wash himself in the pool so that everyone knew it wasn't the mud that healed him. Right? It had to be.
Where was that? Was it like it? I mean, is there anything in history that says where the pool was? I mean, it must have been a public place where everybody would go and
Yeah,
hang out. Or
do
something.
you have any insight on that, Joe?
Just curious.
It is a real historical place.
Right.
I think it's referred to in Edersheim's Life of Christ. Problem is we're just dependent on ancient authors to tell us what the temple grounds look like.
Well, it wasn't like a man-made thing like a
Before the
colonnade, that
construction.
type of thing, right? It was just a pool.
Probably was, may not have been. So here, I was actually talking with someone about this on a completely different topic, right? So when I was in my Exodus and Torah class, we went through and we traced out, or the professor had pre-done this for us, right? The journey of the Israelites during the 40 years, right? Mm-hmm. And there were, let's just say, 20 place names. They went from here to here to here to here to here, all the way down, right? Like 20 names. And on the other half of the slide, he said, all right, these are the places we know that the Israelites went. And he clicks and he said, these are the ones where we know what they're talking about. And it's like 2. We don't even know where Mount Sinai is, by the way. And don't tell the people that run the monastery at the foothills or at the base of Mount Sinai. It may as well be Mount Sinai. That's fine. I heard that there's a beautiful hike going up there. But we don't even know where Mount Sinai is, right? And all these other place names, they were villages and towns and things like that, but none of them exist anymore. And they were probably at least somewhat, the opposite of sedentary. They would have existed as think like an old Western trading post that nomadic people groups stop by at regularly, right? They're not big established places, just with the area of the world that we're in, right? Sinai Peninsula. And they've just been lost to time. They knew exactly what that all meant, and they could have traced it out on their maps that they have, right? That happens even here. Same with the pool of the other one, Bethsaida, whatever it was. All these names are too similar for me. We don't actually know which one it is because, we'll put it this way. This is a very specific analogy. On my way from my house to where I went to elementary through middle school, there was a little shopping center that had an Albertsons in it. When I was in like 3rd grade, the Albertsons closed down. It's now something completely different. I don't even know what it is anymore, right? It's not even a grocery store, right? I could write down in my memoirs, oh, we would always pass the Albertsons. It was on our left midway through our journey, right? Someone who, Bill took that, went to Oviedo, and he's like, I know that he had vaguely this route. I don't know where the Albertsons is, and, right? I gotta go, maybe he can say, well, I'll go find some old people who've lived here forever, and maybe they can tell me. But if this is someone doing it 100 years, 200 years later, the place names change, just as people change and do things. So a lot of these place names that we have, even in the New Testament, we know that they existed. We don't know where they
It's
are.
like Ararat too, isn't that like a bunch of mountains?
Oh yeah. A lot of them. We know like where Mount Carmel is, right? That one is still called Mount Carmel. You can pull that up on Google Maps, and we know what the Sea of Galilee is, right? We know some of these things, but not all of them. So what exactly that pool was, not really sure.
But we know that it was.
Right, but we know that it was, right? Good. So Jesus spits on the ground, makes mud. The commentator that I rely on for the most part, he used a different translation of that word. So I don't know if Joe has any deep insight. Not that Jesus didn't make mud, but he made clay. Do you have...
Clay is one of the references, loam, sort of a mushy earth.
Yeah.
But I think it's mainly just to make us think of Genesis.
Okay, so there are 2 reasons why clay is a good translation. One is that we are made from the dust of the earth, the clay of the earth, a similar vocable. I don't know if it's the same one in the Septuagint.
It's like used in pottery.
Yeah. And so we have those connections, right? And so Jesus is kind of doing his thing again, right? And he created Adam and Eve. The other one that I think is more poignant here is that making and forming clay is one of the specifically forbidden things to do on the Sabbath in rabbinic tradition. It is an act, it is something it's written down. You may not form and shape clay. And so I think John had this in mind. And John put down, Jesus made clay, like he wasn't supposed to be doing. And he used it to heal the man, which, according to the Pharisees, he also wasn't supposed to be doing, right? And we've kind of already dealt with this a little bit, right? Jesus, I think it was the paralytic, right? Where we talked about how Cyril says, as soon as he healed him and told him to sin no more, he told him to go sin and break the Sabbath, right? And not sin, he told him to go break the Sabbath, right? Yeah, and by the way, breaking Sabbath is going to be a problem in the text coming up. So, let's actually read a little bit more, right? So the man goes, he has the clay on his eyes. One of the fathers, I don't forget who, said, he must have been quite the spectacle and gained quite the following when this man who was blind had a whole bunch of mud caked onto his face and then was running through town to go wash himself in a pool, which of course goes to that witness sort of aspect, because they all got to see him be healed, and then naturally they would ask about it, right?
Actually, a big wad of spit.
Yeah, well, so the commentary does have this big aside that he even says isn't that important, but, it's in the book, right? Of the historical and contemporary discussion of spit being used in healing. Jesus does this a couple of times. I think he spits and puts his fingers in someone's ears at one point. Then there's the really weird one out of Mark, I believe, where he uses spit to heal a man who's blind and it doesn't work, and then he has to do it again. right?
It works partially.
You're right, yes.
I see people that look like trees.
Trees walking around, right? Which how the man knew a tree. Anyway,
It's definitely on the tongue.
yeah. So I mean, this is used by Jesus regularly. It's also we have more than one story of people appealing to the Roman emperors to spit on them to heal them, specifically of blindness. Even when Vespasian came to power, there's an account of a man who came and told Vespasian, "Spit on my eyes so that I can see." Right. So yeah, they went through this whole thing. I don't know. Yeah, I think when we read these details, there are some people that go into really long conversations about the two natures of Christ and how this proves two natures stuff, which is fair, but we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. We're seeing that Christ is the one working these miracles, right? Good. Any other questions on the first 7 verses? All right. So volunteer, like I said, we're just going to do it paragraph by paragraph. 8 through 12, please.
Let me just ask,
Yeah.
go back to verse 7. And it says he anointed the man's eyes.
Oh, thank you. So that's verse 6 in mine. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud. Yes.
The word anointed,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean?
I'll say this. It's a loaded word. Thank you. I meant to mention this. Is the word? Do you have the Greek up?
Yeah.
Of course he does. Does that word start with the chi?
It's a combination. It starts with epi, ekrisin.
Okay. Yeah. The word there is Christ. Is the root word.
Is what?
Christ. Christ means the anointed one. That's why we have christenings. It has to do with anointing. That's also in the Old Testament. You can see those foreshadowings, right? When like David is anointed, he's christened, right? And so it kind of points us forward. And Jesus is the anointed one. So there's a messianic sort of language going on here. And I will say this is not the only time in this text that we will see messianic, borderline, divine language being associated with the man born blind. Now, in this one, it's a little less troublesome, let's just say, where Jesus is Jesus, the anointed one, is anointing this man and making him and healing him, right? So we can see some baptismal connections. We can see salvation connections here. The other one is going to be in the next section, I think. Anyway, we'll get to the other one when we get there. But it's a loaded term, and John is using it specific. I think in this case, it just means that he put it on his eyes, right? Though anointing is, I'm pretty sure anointing is the verb you would use for like rubbing an ointment on something. Yeah. So like applying a medicine or a poultice or something like that would also apply here. But when John uses phrases like this, because he could have just as easily said he placed it on his eyes. Like they got a different verb for that. So when it says that he, anoints him, I think there's messianic undertones to that.
Yeah, Vaticanus has the other word.
What was that?
Vaticanus has the other word as a.
Oh, does it? Interesting.
They placed it upon him.
Well, there we go. Which one do you prefer?
Well, if everybody else other than Vaticanus, Vaticanus is good in Mark's gospel, but it's not consistent.
This, by the way, is a text criticism thing, not historical critical. This is what those text critics that look at the different, one old manuscript has this, another one has another one, right? Probably in this case, I have no idea, so I could be wrong. But if we have one text that has a different verb, it probably means that a scribe was uncomfortable with what was written there, and so said, that's not appropriate to use in this position of on a person when talking about Jesus, so I'm going to change that word. That's how a text critic might look at something like this. Anyway, volunteer for 8 through 12, please. Thank you, Mark.
The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is he." Others said, "No, but he is like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." So they said to him, "Then how were your eyes open?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know."
All right, so he gets healed. Oh, and here's where, so correction. He knows the name, he doesn't know where Jesus is. That was the issue. People see him and they're asking the question, right? Is it him? And then, right, is it he? Others said no, but it's like him. And what is his answer?
Ego eimi.
His answer is ego eimi anthropon, right? Is it on or is it a different ending there?
No, hote ego eimi.
Oh, he doesn't even have the okay. Yeah, so he uses that divine phrase. Now, one thing to mention. We've been making such a big deal of ego eimi, and it's worth making a big deal of ego eimi. This man is not saying, "I am Yahweh." He's not doing that. But we do have him, while he's being questioned, he uses that phrase, which, just for some context, right? Verse 58 of chapter 8, Jesus says it. So we're, 10 verses later, and we now have this man using that same phrase. It's, like I said, this is the one that's more problematic of quasi-divine language being used with this individual. So what do we make of this? Do we make anything of this, or do we just say, it's words are words, grammar's grammar, whatever?
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but
Okay, so in verse 9, while the people are asking, is this the blind man? Some are saying, yeah, it is. Others are saying, no, but it looks like him.
that's what I don't understand. How it looks like.
And he kept
Well,
saying,
because he's not blind anymore. So you have some people who just don't believe, right? They've exhausted their options. Like, well, I know it's not the blind man because this guy can see, and the blind man can't see. So it must just be someone who looks like him,
Yeah.
right?
he was pleading his case because it says he kept saying.
Yeah, and
It's
so
not
he-
like he said, "Hey, it was me." He kept saying, "Hey, it's me." No, I'm the guy. It was me.
Right, yeah, he is. People are having this argument around him, and you can almost see almost cartoonish. He's popping. He's like, "No, it's me. Hi, right here. It's me. You can ask me, right?" But the phrase he uses there, where he kept saying, "I am the man," he uses that same phrase that is the divine name, ego eimi. I am. Chapter 8, so right before this. Jesus says, right, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, ego eimi, I am." That should be capitalized in your text because he's using the divine name there. And that's why they want to kill him, right? They recognize that's what he's saying. They don't agree with him, but what his point is not lost on them. And then so, like I said, 10 verses later, thereabouts, we have this man who has been healed by Jesus saying, ego eimi, or hote, just I am, right? I'm that guy. And so, what do we make of that? Is this just a case where John's just relaying what the guy actually said, and it has nothing to do with that? Or is John potentially trying to make a deeper, broader point here with what he's saying? especially in light of the fact that he was just Christ, right? He was just anointed. And that Jesus potentially has said, we, the two of us, need to do the work of the Father.
Ah.
What do we think? Or we just think that Pastor, was smoking something before class today? Who knows what in the world's happening over here?
Well, Jesus draws a deep connection between those that he sends with the message about him. As the Father sent me, so I send you.
Yeah, that's a really good parallel, right? Because especially, well, I guess it was just you who were at the Nicene Creed. By the way, if you are really regretting that you missed out on the Nicene Creed presentation, I was just given, I don't know if you got it too, a recording of the presenters portions. I haven't looked at it at all, so if you're interested, I'll forward that to you. But as we discussed in the Nicene Creed conversation, the Father sends the Son, that's like Trinitarian level interaction between the two persons of the Trinity. And Jesus says, that same sending relationship that I have with the Father, and the Father definitely, and maybe the Son, has with the Holy Spirit, right? I now have with you, right? So absolutely, that's I think part of what's going on here, is that Jesus is really drawing that close, intimate connection with this man. Anything else?
The other thing he said in terms of that connection is who receives you receives.
And I think that's kind of the rest of it. I think the people there would not have made this connection. But what I think John wants us to almost hear is, I am the man who was healed by the I am, right?
Yeah.
I am the one who God healed, right? I think that's the kind of poetic impact of what John is trying to do here, right? So this man is, right, this question comes up, this man, why is this man blind, basically? And Jesus says, it's so that the two of us can do the work that we were sent for, right? By the way, the pool means sent, right? So he sends the man to the pool called Sent, which, that sounds weird to us. It's called a Hebraicism. John loves to do this. Hebrew talks this way. It's why you hear things like God of Gods. It doesn't mean, actually, Dr. Maxwell talks about this on Saturday too. It doesn't mean he's one of a bunch. It means he's the greatest, right? I'm trying to think of other places.
It's a superlative.
It is a superlative. That you might have, he wept a great weeping, is how the Old Testament or Hebrew would say, like, he was wailing, right? And you kind of have that sort of taste here. The sent one sends the one to the pool of sent, right? So it's kind of piling that image up. He is anointed to do that, just as the Son is anointed in the baptism and just before his death, right? To go out into the world. And then he is proclaiming himself, yes, but more Jesus.
Which is totally appropriate. I mean, if you think about it, this man has never seen anything. He's been in darkness before he could feed himself. And now, all of a sudden, could you imagine what he must be looking at, what must be going on? He must be filled with the Spirit. He's probably, I mean, I'll tell you.
You have a man who's been in darkness, who now for the first time is in light, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the light in John? Jesus, right? And so we now reading back, right? Like I said, I don't think when this man was running around saying Ego and Hoti, right? They weren't going, oh, it's a divine name. No. They weren't thinking that. But the people who John wrote this for would have likely seen a parallel there. By the way, I think this is worth doing here. This is why pastors study the original language. I know when I went to seminary, I had the same thought, and I hear it from people all the time, because I think it's just naturally what we tend to think of is, why do pastors learn language? And you get some version of, oh, well, so they can tell me the difference between the four loves in Greek, and they get some nuance with some words, right? They can tell me dunamis, the word for power of God, is the same word for dynamite. And yeah, that's there, but you don't need to learn the language to do any of that, right? You just need like a vocab book. The real reason you learn the language is for nuances like this, especially in the more poetic sections, is where it really shines clearly, where you get more of the artistic nuances that you can't translate well, or would be very, very difficult to translate. It was humorous to me at the Nicene Creed presentation, because Dr. Maxwell kept getting translation questions. And he would ask about language, and then everyone just took it, at least at my table, took it in a translation direction. Like, that's not what he's talking about. And he just kept trying to say the same thing of translation is an art, not a science. And he was trying to say it, and it was very convincing to me, because I knew all the details. But I think a lot of people there just didn't have the background of what translation work is actually like. Because, how many of you know a foreign language? I don't. My hand's not. I don't. And so I think a little bit. Un poquito. Baño. Queso. Right? The only two things you need, right? I think that because so many Americans don't speak a foreign language, these nuances of translation are just lost on us because we never do it. So we don't recognize that grammar is way more important than vocabulary in translation. And so that's kind of what's going on here. So this sort of thing is the reason why your pastors studied Greek and Hebrew, and why I have expensive books for the people who actually know what they're talking about. Because, well, do you know what happens when when someone has beginner Greek and a Greek Bible? They become heretics very quickly. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, the sent one, all of that kind of stuff. And he gives the account of what happened to him. And they say, who did this? He points out Jesus, right? Where is he? Don't know, right? I didn't see where he went, right? I mean, he's not making a pun there, but I did.
He's never seen him.
Right, and that's the other thing, is you can't point him out in a crowd, right? Notice, it's going to be a very long time before he runs into Jesus again. Not dissimilar to the man who was paralyzed, right? It's not until later that Jesus goes and finds him. Any other questions on 8 through 12? Because we've dealt with the miracle, we'll go more quickly through the rest of this. But if there are any questions, I don't want us to run through them. So we'll do this before I call for a volunteer to read. Why do you think the crowd, is saying, where is he?
They may want more healing.
That's one option. Is there another option?
You want to arrest him.
They want to arrest him. I think we get some parallels, right, to the Christmas story, right? The shepherds, where is he? I want to go find him so that I can worship him. Herod, where is he? Oh,
They were excited that he really was.
going on. Whereas the shepherds and Herod can say the same thing. They're asking for different reasons. The crowds are probably asking for those same reasons, right? Some of them are excited. Hey, show me where this guy is. I want to see, at the very least, even if they don't have their own healing that they want, I want to see the guy who did this, right? Maybe they're even going, I want to see the one who gives sight to the blind. Or maybe they're making some connections there, right? And then you definitely have, if a Pharisee is asking this question, is you show me this man that did this on the Sabbath. I need to know where he is, because I need to go take care of him. And by the way, we get a very slight echo of this that does appear later in John, where they're looking for the man called Jesus. Is this the man? And we kind of hear almost a very slight echo of Pilate, "Are you the man? Behold the man," right? It's slight, but we're starting to see that begin to build, right? All right, verse 13 through 17, please. Volunteer for that.
Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him? Since he has opened your eyes," he said, "he is a prophet."
All right, so they don't know where Jesus is, so they take the man and they go to the Pharisees. I don't want to necessarily attribute this to malice. Probably some of them were. The Pharisees were the theological experts of the day, so they brought the man to hit them so that they could figure out what's going on, right? And what's the Pharisees' reaction to the man who is healed?
They're all bent out of shape
Yeah,
about the
'cause
Sabbath instead of the miracle of guy receiving.
Yeah, well, so before we cast judgment, which is fair, but before we cast judgment, they are bent out of shape about the fact that this happened on the Sabbath, right? He did things that he was not supposed to do on the Sabbath. Why is that a big deal to them? And they give us, we get hints of the answer here, right? So some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But other Pharisees, right? And then I lose my place, right? "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" And there was a division among them, right? So what are the two options that the Pharisees are wrestling with here? So they have a man who has healed someone else on the Sabbath, doing things he wasn't allowed to do on the Sabbath. What are the two factions that then split within the Pharisees?
He broke the rule.
Yeah.
He broke the rule, therefore he is...
Not from God.
There we go. I was getting ready to walk us there, but you go. He's not from God, right? Or what's the other option?
He's got to be from God.
Sinners can't do this, so he has to be from God, right? And there's a division, right? Now, how can a sinner do this? This is a good camp. We're happy with them. We're in agreement with that. What's the issue fundamentally? Or I guess maybe this. This is not the only time we see the Pharisees kind of struggling with this problem, where they see Jesus doing something miraculous. It doesn't fit with their framework of how things are supposed to function, and they don't come out and accuse Jesus of anything here. Other places they do. Specifically, they accuse Jesus when he's casting out demons. Do you remember what they accuse him of?
That he's with Satan.
He's with Satan, right? So fundamentally, you have a division among the Pharisees, and if the Pharisees are divided, you best believe the people are divided, right? And it's really a question of, this man is at least from God, right? God sent this person, or the devil sent this person. And they can't figure out what it is. I mean, they all think that they figured it out on either side, but as a group, they don't know which one. They don't know if this is God or the devil. Kind of problematic, right? So what do? Well, let's get it from the donkey's mouth. What do you think about this guy, right? And what's his response?
He's a prophet.
He's a prophet, right? Now, I've already talked about this. When we see them saying he's a prophet, that is not necessarily just saying, oh, he's just another in a long line. No. if he's a prophet, the odds, if you will, of him being the Messiah are very, very high, right? The only reason they're not 100% is because last time they ran into a prophet, he actively said, it's not me, it's the next guy. Which, by the way, that's John the Baptist, right? Which kind of leaves you with the conclusion of, okay, if it wasn't John, and it was the one he was preparing for, and he prepared this person, and he is a prophet, we're walking down that logical step of he's the Messiah, right? So it's not fully fleshed out, but the blind man confesses Jesus as prophet, yes, more or less Messiah here. Like I said, it's not all laid out. He's not German in a 27-point essay or anything like that, but he's pushing that direction. All right, verse 18 through 23.
I'll do it.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, quick question.
Oh, good. Hold on, Bill. We got a question. Yes, sir.
So, during this time, the Pharisees would have believed that Satan had the power to heal, or somebody from Satan?
We don't really know what exactly they would have. They imply it.
Yeah.
When they're dealing with Jesus casting out demons, which is dealing with, I think it's a parallel because of the way the response is happening, even though that's not in this gospel and it's a different situation, right? But I think what the Pharisees get at in the one with Satan, or with the demons, is just based on Jesus' response, is that they think that the devil is tricking them. Right? It's not, and then Jesus says, house divided against himself can't fall, right? So either there's a civil war in hell, and you don't really need to worry about that, but you do need to worry if I'm God, because then you're in trouble if you deny me, right? And I think my assumption would be that something similar is happening in their minds now. Let's not forget some of the historical context for these individuals, right? Specifically, my mind immediately goes to the Magi, the magic workers in Egypt, who are doing miracles, just like Moses is. And they are doing them with the power of the devil, basically. And they would have recognized that sort of thing. Balaam is doing the same thing. He is cursing people with the power of demons. You got the medium, the witch in Endor, who's kind of doing similar stuff, although that one gets weird because Samuel pops up. That's a weird story. So the idea that evil presences, Satan, demons, had power on earth was not lost on them. They would have recognized that to be a reality. And my guess is the assumption here is that their idea is, well, they have a false prophet here who's, yes, he's doing some of the Messiah things, but he's doing them in such a way that it's clear to us that he's not from God because he's breaking the Sabbath, right? That's their telltale sign. Line of thinking could go, right? He's not keeping God's laws. He's doing things that we aren't expecting him to do. He doesn't look like what we thought the Messiah would try and do. And you also need to remember, these are people who are under persecution, have a history of being under persecution within the past couple hundred years, and are very worried about what will happen in the world if this isn't the real Messiah. For good reason. They've tried it. It didn't work. And they're going to try it a couple more times in the future. And it is that Rome will annihilate them. They know that they're on a short leash with Rome. They know that the Romans don't really like the way the Jewish people have been behaving. They've been problematic in the Romans' eyes, right? And so they know they're on a short leash. So if they have someone who is In their mind, it's like, oh, well, this is how the devil's going to kill us all. He's going to make us follow this false prophet, who is then going to get us in trouble with Rome. Rome's going to wipe us out. Satan wins, right? That's, I think, how the things might have gone in their minds. Again, trying to not just cast disparities and recognize that these are intelligent people that are trying to be faithful. I mean, I think that we lose that. The Pharisees aren't bad guys. I mean, they do things that they're not supposed to. They're problematic. They are in opposition to Christ. But like, fundamentally, they're not bad. And a portion of them, at least, are on Jesus' side here. So I think they get a bad name. And I think that when we do that, disparaging their whole group, it helps us excuse ourselves when we start to do similar things, right? You know, we become Pharisees in that sort of a sense. I mean, and again, Nicodemus, he was a Pharisee, right? And we know that he was faithful through the end, right? So yeah, I think these are reasonable people. They're wrong, but they're reasonable people. And they're trying to be faithful. They're just... And I think this is sometimes what is frustrating to Jesus, is like, guys, I'm right here. Just open your eyes and you'll see that I'm what you're trying to do, right? Because in this case, they're gonna go off on the Sabbath, right? So we're running low on time, so maybe we'll deal with this and then close it out. What are the Pharisees trying to do? Why do they get so bent out of shape when Jesus does things on the Sabbath and breaks the Sabbath laws? Why do they have all these extra traditions surrounding it? What's their motivation?
They're trying to hold the Ten Commandments. Right?
Yeah, so part of it, I think a big part, is they're trying to be faithful, right? I'm very much convinced, and I've said this before, right? The problem that the Israelites have in the Old Testament during the era of the kings is primarily idolatry and also just not keeping the covenant in general, right? And so what does God do? God chastises them by sending them into exile. We have a few stories from the exile, right? Book of Daniel, Book of Esther. Ezra and Nehemiah take place during that time. It's a different thing. We'll talk about them in a second. What are hallmarks of the stories, at least, that you know from Esther and Daniel, right? In fact, that was the chapel service, was Daniel in the lion's den today. So you get Daniel in the lion's den, you got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. You know, maybe you know Daniel eating veggies and all that kind of stuff, right? And then you have Esther kind of saving her people through the whole book. What are some hallmarks of these people that we have stories about while they're living in exile? Well, why?
Faithful to God.
They're extremely faithful to God, right? Why are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown in the furnace?
Because they wouldn't worship and bow down to the king.
They wouldn't worship a false idol. Their parents, I don't know exactly, right? Parents and grandparents would have had no problem with that. They were like, I'll go to Yahweh's temple later. It wouldn't have bothered them, which is what God was trying to correct, right? This is all going to tie back in. Stick with me. Same thing with Daniel. Why does Daniel get thrown in the lion's den? Just refuses to stop praying to God, right? And his parents and grandparents would have had no problem with that. And yet, the vegetable thing, he's trying to stand out and keep himself separated from the Babylonian hosts, if you will. He's recognizing that, hey, I am a person set apart by God. It's what Israel was supposed to be. This is why one of the reasons why God gets so frustrated. It's like, you look exactly like the nations. No one would be able to tell by looking at you. With Daniel, they can. Esther, same thing. She's willing to die to save her people, right? And so you have this group of people that God teaches them their lesson well. They learn it well. They learn their lesson so well that they then have problems when Jesus shows up. They almost learn it too well. By the way, this also bears itself out in the intertestamental period, right? Especially that identity of I am different than the people around me, I'm set apart. The Jews under Seleucid rule, so there's the Babylonians, then the Persians, then Alexander the Great comes through, and then Alexander the Great dies at like 26. How much did you accomplish? The largest contiguous land empire until the Mongolians, right? And then he dies at 26 or something like that, crazy. And then his generals fight over his kingdom. The Seleucids are one of the groups that comes out of the War of the Diadochi. It's a whole thing. Under the Seleucids, the Jews suffer intense persecution because they aren't Hellenizing. They aren't becoming part of the homogenous state, and they're on a border, and you got to have loyal people on the border, so it becomes a problem. And what are the two things that set the Jews apart? One of them's more visible than the other, unless you're a Greek. So Steve knows one of them. What's the one that's unless you're a Greek?
The Sabbath?
Well, that's the other one.
Circumcision.
Right? The Greeks love, running around naked. Anyway. Yeah, and the Sabbath became one of the primary ways that the Jews separated themselves from everyone else. They were, and so much so that at one point, like there's actually a little mini crisis during the Maccabean revolt, because the Seleucids are like, well, let's just go attack them on Saturday, because the dummies can't fight back, right? And they have to kind of deal with, are we allowed to defend ourselves on the Sabbath? Because we're set apart, we're different, right? And so they're resisting these pressures, right? By the way, I said I'd mention Ezra and Nehemiah. They too, as they come back, are extremely faithful to God. They trust in God while they're building the temple, while they're building the wall. Everything they do is surrounding this identity of we are now God's people, right? We do not worship idols. We worship the one true God. We rest on the Sabbath day. We practice circumcision. I mean, the no pork thing comes up a couple of times, right? But remember, just before, or when Pilate comes into power, he just puts an eagle, which is a semi-religious symbol. He puts it up in the temple courtyard, and they almost burn Jerusalem to the ground in the riot that follows. Because, no, you don't do that. That's God's temple. Nothing blasphemous goes in there, right? Meanwhile, in the Old Testament, they were sacrificing to other gods. And there was an Asherah pole in the temple at one point, right? And so you have these Pharisees who, and culturally, the Pharisees are the strictest of the strict, right? That's kind of how part of how they separate themselves out as a group. They are extremely conservative in the sense of keeping to the old ways. The Sadducees were a little bit more willing to Hellenize. They kind of said, well, we'll take the good practices and leave the bad, and we can merge a little bit with society. The Pharisees were very much, no, we must look entirely different, which is why the Pharisees are interacting with the people more, because the Sadducees were also kind of rich, and they just hung out in the temple a lot, and they didn't talk to those people very often because they had all the money. But the Pharisees were like, they're grassroots, right? And so then you have this guy who things that, like, my kingdom's not of this world, right? Which they just hear the my kingdoms, right? I am the king, right? I am David's heir. I am the anointed one. And I am the son of man, right? Which is Ezekiel imagery coming in, and Elijah stuff. And from the Pharisees' standpoint, you now have someone who is upsetting the apple cart, yes. Threatening their power, yes. And I think that's part of this, but I think we, again, lean too heavily on that when we look at them. But he's doing those things. He's also not paying attention to the traditions that set them apart for the past 300 years, made them who they are, that at least in their mind, they learned as God chastised them with the Babylonians, right? And who's right at their doorstep for God to use to punish them if they backslide? The Romans don't even have to invade. They're right there. If God wants to punish us for following this new false god that's walking around saying he's Yahweh, right?
Yeah.
Who's doing insane, ungodly things like healing on the Sabbath and working on the Sabbath and ignoring Sabbath traditions. And his disciples don't wash themselves properly. And they don't fit the established, not only the established norms, but the identity of these people. How they have separated themselves from the world and how they have kept themselves from falling back into the sins of their fathers, right? And then Jesus comes and just starts with a wrecking ball knocking all this stuff down. You can kind of understand why they're thinking, this guy's got to go, right? In fact, I'm convinced all the Pharisees that were screaming for Jesus to be crucified were in their mind, at least part of it was, we're getting rid of a false idol that is endangering our people to follow our ancestors in their false worship, right? And here's the other thing. They're absolutely correct if Jesus isn't who he is, right? The only reason that the Pharisees are in the wrong here is because Jesus is God and he is the Sabbath, right? He's not only Lord of the Sabbath. This was the Sabbath point I wanted to make in my last. See, I got into it. But the Sabbath was made so that we could have a picture of what eternal life and forgiveness is in Christ. So the Sabbath is Jesus. And, right, those who find their rest in him, not in not working on the Sabbath day, right? All this time that they have been using the Sabbath to seclude themselves, separate themselves from the world, which was a good thing, now finds its fulfillment in the person of Christ. That devotion is supposed to shift to Jesus now. And some Pharisees, Nicodemus and others, they are recognizing this, right? But the ones that are the loudest and the ones that end up having their way, at least in Jesus' lifetime, is the party that does not want Jesus involved, that thinks that he's false. Which again, they're right unless Jesus is who he says he is. And he is, right? So that's where the problem comes in. And that's, hopefully you at least have a better understanding now of why do the Pharisees keep getting so bent out of shape about stuff? And, we all know that it's because they're not fair, you see. But also, there are real reasons. And it's worth identifying them. Good. Like I said, we closed with that conversation. If there's anything else, any questions or anything you want to deal with, in short, they don't like his answers, so they go to his parents. His parents throw him under the bus and they say, he's of age, let him talk for himself, right? Because they don't want to get involved with this, right? They see bad things happening. Then they go back to the man and they say, give glory to God. And he basically says, I am, it's Jesus. And then Jesus goes and has a conversation with him about, do you believe in the Savior of the world? And he says, yep, who is it? And Jesus says, it's me. And he goes, okay, I believe. Good, wonderful, right? And then, so you can read the rest of the chapter, but that's kind of what's there. So good. Any last minute things? If not, we'll close with the Lord's Prayer. All right, let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom,